Welcome back guys, this is Vishu from SavageCamp, and in this video we are going to look at static methods. So at first, if you don't understand static methods, it's fine because it took me like a day to understand it, like why we use it, but it's not really that difficult. It just helps you make your code more organized, and instead of typing the whole function and classes, I decided to just have a ready-made template ready, so I can just get into it and tell you what actually static methods are. So here you can see we have a class. A class has a constructor where we take the radius, we set the radius, and we have the value of pi. And we can also import math. I don't want to do all those things. Then we have defined circle, which takes the self variable. So all of these are accessible. So it is going to multiply pi r square. So it is pi into radius and radius, which we got from the constructor, and square, which is r square, which is nothing but self.radius into self.radius. The third one is rectangle, that also takes the self, and then it takes a length and a width, and then it gives an area of length into width. So now to use this, we create an object and we call these functions using the object. Pretty simple, basic stuff, you know about this, and this is where static method comes in. Now, can I run this program without using self in rectangle? Because none of the variables that are in self is being used to calculate the area of rectangle. So I can remove this self variable and this is still going to run properly because this does not need the pi or the radius. But if I have to call rectangle, I have to pass in the self variable and I need to define the object, and to define the object I need to pass in the value. So even when I just want to calculate the area of rectangle like this, I don't want the area of circle, I don't want the area of square. Today I am feeling good, so I only want to calculate the area of rectangle, and for that I still have to pass in the 5 radius value that we are not going to use, and then call and create an object and call this. To avoid this situation, in order for you to not initialize this, we have static methods. So what you do is just put @ static method, which is built in, and what this says to Python is like, hey, this function might be a part of this class, but it does not need any of the self variables. It can work on its own. So it is a static method. What this also means is that if I want to call this function, I don't need an object because I don't need to like define any constructors. I don't need to define anything in the constructor to call this object. So if instead of creating an object and then calling this, I can just call it using the class name. So I can say areas, which is our class name, dot, and I can say rectangle of 4 and 5. So if I run this now, it is going to give the area of rectangle. And the reason it gave that without initializing the self variable is because of this decorator static method. So all this decorator says to Python is that this function is independent. It does not need the self variables. I don't need to create a constructor and pass variables to it to initialize the class and then call this function. It is independent, it can handle its own thing, and that is why it doesn't need an object. We can just call it by the class name. So for circle, I cannot do that because it needs to be initialized. So I can do areas.circle and try to run this. This is going to throw an error. I can do 4. This is again going to throw an error because circle is not taking any variables except self. So if I want circle, I will do object is equal to areas and I will have to pass in the radius. So I can do 5 and now I can call in circle. But with a static method, you don't need that. With a static method, you can just call in areas.rectangle and you will get the value. So I hope this was helpful, guys. If you have any questions, just put it in the comments. I will make one more program if you guys still did not understand. But basically just remember, a static method can hold on its own. It does not need an object to be called, and it does not take in the self variable, which is why it is independent. And you don't need a constructor to be initialized to call the static method. So I think that is it for this video, guys, and I will see you guys in the next one.